Good morning, everybody. We are learning in the Shulchan Aruch today. Moshe ben Chaim. We are on the laws of conducting a proper meal. So I've introduced this. In other words, this is not going to teach us, how many courses we're supposed to have, or this is not the food channel. We're learning when we have a meal, how should we conduct ourselves? And you'll see why it's important in a moment for a variety of reasons. The first thing, though, is this amazing law about feeding our animals first. So we're in chapter 42 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and we go like this. If you have animals or fowl, that you are responsible for feeding, right? They don't get food any other way. You're not supposed to eat anything else before you feed your animals. As it says in Devarim, I shall provide grass in your field for your cattle, and you will eat and you'll be satisfied. To see that the Torah precedes feeding animals before feeding people. But when it comes to refreshments, drinking, then you can give water to the person first, as it says in Bereshis. Drink, and I'll even water your camels, right, in this verse with Rivka and Eliezer. It's also written in Bamidbar. You can drink to assembly and then to the ant. First you drink. So when it comes to food, we feed the animals first. When it comes to people being thirsty, we're going to give the water first to the people. And I'll just share a little thing. Do not have many life lessons that were handed down to me from my grandfather because he passed away. Both my grandfathers. I'm referring now to my mother's father, Moshe Ephraim Shimenovich, also known as Fred Schumann, may his Neshama have an Aliyah. So he was educated a bit in yeshiva before coming to the United States, and he taught my mom, who taught us, you always feed the animals first. And it's one of those things that was handed down from the family. Now, of course, today, I don't have cows or sheep, but if you have a pet, the same would apply to your pet. So you need to feed your animals before you feed yourself. Okay. It's doraisa. It's not just not just being nice. Number 2, lo yechal adam v'lo yishte. You shouldn't eat or drink deris rav sanas. So rav sanas comes from the word rav, being like very hungry. We're going to say like in a gluttonous way, shoving food in our mouth. Lo yechal me'umad. You shouldn't eat standing, v'lo yishte me'umad, or eat or drink or even drink while standing. Ve'yehi shulchanu naki, your table should be clean, umuchesa yafen, and nicely covered. Va'afilu im ein lo lechol, even nothing to eat. Rak davar she'enu chashuv, just something insignificant. Lo yechzav perusa gedol lebkebeh, you shouldn't take hold of a piece of food as large of an egg. You shouldn't, again, we have to understand, because today we have certain foods that are dafka meant to be eaten like this. You should take hold of the food with one hand, and tear from it with the other hand. All these things, by the way, we're going to get to. The whole idea is that we should be elevating our eating and not eat like wilde chaya, as we'd say in Yiddish, wild animals. You shouldn't drink an entire cup of wine at one time. If you did, Gran, you're like a glutton. Bishnei pamim, drinking by lifting your cup twice. Zed derech eretz. So In other words, or shlishi, where you drink by lifting your cup 2 or 3 times, i.e., in other words, you drink in small amounts, that is better. Reizeh, migese haruach, im loy, keshehu kois gadol b'yoser, yochel lishtois afilu b'kama pamim, v'chein kois katan oid, also a small cup, yochel lishtois b'pamachas. Okay. So in other words, if you've got a cup and you kind of just down it in one thing, that's not considered nice. You take sips from it, that is much better. Okay, let's just look at this a little bit. He's talking about like tearing apart, like you have this is the best case. You have a turkey leg, right? And you're pulling off pieces of the meat and eating it. That's considered not proper, right? We're not talking about like having a loaf of bread, taking off a piece of the loaf of bread and then eating that, right? We're taking like something that you're eating the whole thing of, but you eat it by like this. I believe that's what he's referring to. Like the best case would be like a turkey leg that I could think of. So you're using both your hands to kind of tear apart the food as you're eating it. So, and then this idea of how much to drink and so forth, I wouldn't worry yourself too much about it. Insofar as most of our cups are pretty big, so we're going to have a few sips, you know. That's good, right? Like just downing a whole glass of wine or something. Now, however, what about when it comes to, see, my question is vodka. What about vodka or tequila when the custom is to do it in a shot? So that's why he says, a very small cup, you can drink in a small amount, right? So, and he also talks about in the Mishnah Berurah, whether it's a weaker wine or stronger liquor, right? So again, we won't go much, don't get too bogged down by this, but but there's no problem with having a shot of vodka because it's a small, that's the way it's a small little cup. But you shouldn't have a glass of vodka and chug it down in one shot. Now, what about not take hold of a piece of food as large of an egg? So, you know, what about a sandwich or a hamburger or a hot dog, right? The whole idea of a hamburger is you're holding the whole thing in your hand and taking a bite out of it. So I could imagine a person who wants to be a real Yerushalayim, or, you know, listen, when a person eats a big hamburger, as delicious and wonderful it is, it's not usually a very appetizing, or not appetizing, it's a very, you know, it can get a little bit gross, you know, the stuff's dripping everywhere and so forth. And people like, they I guess people enjoy that because they do it all the time. But is that really, so, I mean, if you really want to be a little bit more attentive in your eating, you would cut it up. Now, I don't know how you would cut up a hamburger. I'm not sure that's even possible. So we're going to have to leave that one until Eliyahu Nevi comes and says how we're supposed to eat the hamburgers properly. But I would say like this, there's definitely one should not mock somebody who decides they don't want to eat the hamburger or the hot dog, right? Or even a piece of pizza, right? Even a piece of pizza, you take a big piece and you're going to take a bite off pieces. So we definitely have some very popular foods which would seem to run counter to some of the advice here in the Shulchan Aruch. And one could be stringent for sure in an attempt to be elevating their eating. And we'll leave it at that. We're going to go to number 3. Lo yishoif perusa. You shouldn't take a bite into a piece of bread and then put it back on the table. Or give it to your fellow. Or put it back in the serving dish. Because it might be repulsive. You eat a piece and you put it back in, or you give it to your buddy. Okay. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, in other words, you bit off a piece and you took that piece and put it on the table. Okay, that's what's considered gross. But if you bit off a piece of challah and then put the uneaten piece on the table, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about you bite it off with your teeth and then you put it on the table. That's considered gross. Lo yishtem you should drink from a cup and then give the rest to your fellow to drink. Everyone should take care not to drink from what's left in a cup that his fellow drank, because it could be due to embarrassment, and he might be compelled to drink against his will. What's going on here? So the idea being that you've drunk something and you're like, here, have this. And now that you're putting the person in a situation where they have to refuse whatever you're handing them, and it could embarrass them. And I could really see this coming up when it comes to alcoholic beverages or something like that. You're having a beer and you drink some, you're like, here, you finish it off. So you could see how the whole halacha here is to be sensitive to the people you're with when you're eating, so that you shouldn't embarrass them or make them feel uncomfortable. That's the idea here. So have that real mindfulness. Dalid, lo ye'adam kar kapdan besudas. You shouldn't be a severe attitude in your meals, i.e., shouldn't become easily angry or upset. Well, we never should become easily angry or upset. So I guess all the more so at our meals, we're supposed to be, chill. Why? Because the guests and the members of the house, they'll be reluctant to eat. Because if you start getting annoyed at the meal, your guests or the members of your house, they might not eat because they think that somehow you're upset with them by how they're eating, right? So you want to be careful how, when we're eating, to not display anger or sternness, because it might be misconstrued as being angry or upset at how people are eating. And that's a tough one, because, if you do have a member of the household or a guest who's eating in a way which you might not be comfortable with, especially as happens with kids, right? So how do you do it in a nice way? So you do it, instead of scolding the kid who's put way too much in their mouth, you would say things, hey, it might taste better if you have smaller bites. In other words, you do it in such a way that you don't embarrass the kids as you're trying to instruct them with how to eat. Because it's very easy to do it in a way that might embarrass the kid, and it could embarrass the guests and so forth. We got to have these things in mind. There's also an idea in the Mishnah Berurah. I'm not sure the reasoning behind it, but maybe you have an idea. It says that if the people, the household members, feel that the head of the household is angry at them, they will refrain from giving any food of the meal to the poor. What he might have in mind, i.e., is that if the person who's at the head of the table, who's running the meal, is very strict or stern about the meal in some way, people might be reluctant to now be generous with any leftover food to give to the poor. That could be what it's talking about. Okay. Ein Meshichin Besuda. He's concerned when you're having a meal that you not talk at the same time. Torah, even words of Torah, because he doesn't want you choking. So he doesn't want you eating and talking at the same time. Shema yakdim, kind of right, that your food's going to go on the wrong pipe and you're going to end up choking. Even if you sneeze, so you shouldn't say like, la briut or gesundheit. However, if you're not actually, eating, right, you don't have food in your mouth between courses, then it's a mitzvah to speak words of Torah at the table. Should be very careful, and it's a good custom. After saying hamotzi, he says everybody should say mizmor leDavid Hashem ro'eh l'achsar. Shehu. This is after eating hamotzi, since we're saying Tehillim. This psalm constitutes speaking words of Torah. But he's talking about Torah, Mishnah, Haggadah, any kind of Torah. V'gam tefillah al mazoin esav. So if you say Mizmor leDavid Hashem ro'eh l'achsar lo yisabina seshi arbitzeni ha'menucha yancheni, right? You see the whole paragraph of Psalm 23, not fast and sloppy like I was just doing. It's a prayer for sustenance. It's also a words of Torah. So you just cover all the bases. Lachar Gomar Suda, after you finish the conclusion of the meal, Nagim Lamar Bechol, Alnos Bavel, after the meal, right, before Birkat Hamazon, during the weekday, some have the custom to say Alnos Bavel by the rivers of Babylon, chapter 137. You get extra points if you sing the reggae version, by the rivers of Babylon. Okay. Ubishas Yom Tov, and on Shabbos and Yontif we say Shir Malois, or any day where Tachnun's not said. Oimim Shir Malois B'Shuv Hashem Ubishet Loimed Al Shulchan Mutzach HaSefer. And if you're studying from a book during your meal, you should be careful. Ki shechiach liyais v'sraim toim ketanim. He's worried that they're going to be bookworms. That somehow the bookworms, right, could get onto your food. I guess bookworms were a big deal. We don't have them. They're basically I don't know if they're probably technically not worms, right? They are insects which eat paper, and you can see them a lot in old books that have been defumigated. Holes. I have some old books with little holes through the papers. I'm not an expert in these things, so I can't tell you what insect it is. Again, we call them bookworms, but I don't think it's really technically a worm. Because I think technically a worm has to be in the ground, but they might be a larva of some flying insect. It deposits the egg into the book, and then it looks like a little worm, the little larva. As it's growing up, it's eating through the book. How nice. So you have to be careful. He says not to let. So, but really today, I haven't encountered that problem at my house. But what I have encountered vis-a-vis books is to be careful to not get crumbs in your books, because then you've got a Pesach problem. And you have to be careful from getting too much challah into your book. Everybody have an awesome day. Please God, we will